I was chatting with some other pastors, and one of the things we noticed is there's something in the culture that has started to sort of creep in the church a little bit, and that is just sort of this really, marriage is a 4-letter word. You know, we've seen the statistics outside of the church. The way we've seen them is we've seen the marriage rate dropping, but the cohabitating rate going up. We've seen average age for when people have their first child remain the same. So apparently you're all getting together, still having kids, just afraid to get married. But Barna Research was always they're this kind of Christian, what's the word I'm looking for? They go out and do the surveys and stuff like that. You figure it out. They did some studies and found that actually inside the church, though, that the marriage rate was still holding fairly steady. But recently we've started noticing it's sort of dropping again. And we've, just as pastors were talking, and started noticing how we're hearing more and more in our own churches of people who no likey the marriage. And I get it, because most of it is because you have been married or you've experienced it. And if you have experienced an awful marriage, been around it, I get why you would want nothing to do with that. You know, it's like how I discovered that I was allergic, or I guess I still am, I think, allergic to scallops. There was a time, I was in my 20s still, and I was visiting some friends in Denver. And we were going to go grab lunch before they dropped me off at the airport. So we go to P.F. Chang's. You guys ever been to a P.F. Chang's? Well, yeah. Oh, I love me some. There was a time where I had an unhealthy obsession with a little Chinese takeout place in Tulsa, Oklahoma called Takey Outie. Yeah, a little hole in the wall. So it's like, oh, these guys have to be awesome. And I went there so much that not only when I walked in the door and they said, "Hey, Phil," and that was all they had to say, they knew what I wanted, but I called so often that they'd answer the phone and go, "Hello," and I said, "Hey," and he's like, "Oh, hey, Phil." I knew my voice, knew me intimately, and I would that's kind of back when remember when you could kind of eat whatever you wanted? So you could just have some fun with food. At least I could. I was like, I'm now, and that's no longer like that. Like my boys are kind of like that. They're like gym bro guys kind of, so they're trying to put on weight. Yeah, trying to get on mass. Like, okay, good luck, because if you got my genes, that was tough. But I would go there a lot. So I like Chinese. So I'm like, absolutely, let's go to P.F. Chang's. We go there. I'm a beef with broccoli guy. You throw a little Mongolian sauce in there, and that's the way that they do it in heaven. And a friend of mine got scallops. And I love seafood. And it's kind of like I wasn't an adventurous eater kind of growing up. So now that I'm in my 20s, I'm like, yeah, I'll eat whatever. And I love seafood. I mean, I've raw oysters and fish and everything. I'll eat it. So I'm like, yeah, scallops right now. So I have just a couple of bites of theirs, and then they drop me off in the airport, jump on my flight, heading home. I get about 30 minutes before we need to land, and all of a sudden I'm like, ooh, feeling a little, that doesn't feel quite right. And all of a sudden it's like, ooh, okay. I'm like, I think I'm about to throw up on this plane. And that's when you start doing that Lamaze breathing. You start making deals with God. God, please just don't let me throw up on a plane. How embarrassing is that, right? I had to locate that little puke bag that's around there, but I just focused in. It took all my willpower, get off that plane, grab my bag, got to my car, and then and I hurled like crazy by my car. Oh my gosh, what the heck was that? I don't know. That's so weird because that never happens. And I'm pretty sure I wasn't pregnant. So so I jump in the car, I head home, and I literally pick up Kirsty, and we drive to Tulsa because I got back just in time to grab her. We kind of drove through the night to go visit her family. And so Dana will remember this story very well. She's not in here. Okay. But I went down there, and then that evening, everyone's like, "Hey, what should we eat?" And I was like, "Hey, let's go get P.F. Chang's." I'm like, oh, okay. So we're ordering takeout. And so, my brother-in-law is like, "What do you want?" And I was like, "Well, what are you getting?" He's like, "The scallops." I'm like, "Yeah, dude, that's great." I said, "No, the weirdest thing, was last at P.F. Chang's. I had some scallops, and I don't know if what it was that maybe I ate something, got sick, but you got to get back up on that horse again, right? You can't be afraid of this stuff. So I was like, I will have the scallops. So now I have a full meal of scallops. Oh. And I go to sleep, and my stomach wakes me up in the middle of the night going, dude, what the heck? Just slightly over 24 hours ago, I made it real clear to you, we don't want scallops. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I sprint to the bathroom, and it was like my body was cursing at me. It was just like, you idiot, what were you doing? And I'm hurling. And this was the stage in our lives where both my sister-in-law, Dana, and my wife, Kirsty, both had their firstborn kids. And you know how you are with that firstborn? You better not make a noise and wake that thing up. You guys remember that? Right, where like you get out of bed, and I remember like with Parker, man, I'd get out of bed. We lived in like an old house, about 100 years old. It's going to make noises. And I would take like 2 steps halfway to the bathroom, and she'd be like, shh. And I'm stuck there like, now do I have to wait for her to go back to bed till I can move again? I don't know what to do. She was getting mad at me. So this is in the back of my head there is no quiet, calm way to do this, right? And I am just hurling everything up. You're pleading with yourself at one point, like, come on, stomach, there's nothing left in you, dude. Let it go. I get. That was one of the most awful experiences I can ever remember with food, of throwing up in general. You want to know what I learned out of that? Don't eat scallops. And I tell you what, over the years, I have had I've had chefs tell me, well, the problem is you had P.F. Chang's. I'm telling you, try my scallops. I do them well. No, I do not care. No, I am done with scallops, right? So in the same way, if you have experienced just an awful experience in marriage, I get you saying, I'm done. I do not want any more of this. And I respect that. What I have a problem with is the people who you still get together, you still find someone to fall in love with, you still create a life, but you won't get married. Because somehow you think marriage, that's the problem. There's something in that institution that brings pain, and I get it. It was awful. And so you think, I got to stay away from that. The problem is, who created marriage? God created marriage. When did he create it? Before the fall. Marriage is a part of the original design for humanity, created by God in perfection in Eden, before any sin or anything. So if the marriage is having problems, who's maybe more to blame? Who's bringing the sin into that? The two humans. So what I want to do today is I want to kind of look at this. My hope is, really what I want is I want our church to just have a positive view on marriage. If you don't want to get married, okay, that's all right. If you're in a committed, deep relationship with someone and you're not married, I would encourage you to get married. Right? Because it's like, I think we're also pretty clear in what the Bible says about sex outside of marriage. But I get it. You're so afraid of marriage. You're like, dude, I'll take the sin. Well, I won't head into that. And it makes me sad. It breaks my heart. I'm super pro-marriage. I was a weird, I'm the exception, not the rule. I get it. But I was that guy, 18, 19 years old, and I bought a sermon series on marriage. It was back when you had cassette tapes. Remember those giant booklets, and you'd open them, and there'd be like 100 cassette tapes in there? I would listen to those in my car over and over and over again, because my thing was I knew that the most important decision I'm going to make in my life outside of my commitment to Jesus Christ was whether or not I was going to get married and who I'm going to marry. And so I'm sitting there like, I'm clueless like everyone else is clueless when you get into marriage. How do you do this? I don't know. And I thought, well, you got to figure out how to do it. It's not just mystical, magical. For all you Benson Boone fans, it's probably these three right here. All right. But I got in and I started going through these tapes and started learning these things so that, when I got into a situation in marriage, I could do it the right way. I met my wife. We dated for a really long time. It was like 4 months. I've told the story before. My friend my cousin Mike, who he was here on Easter and Good Friday, if you guys remember him, kind of rocking out here. He was traveling with my wife in China at the time. So 4 months dating. One of those months she was in China, so we weren't together. And I'm like, dude, I'm gonna ask her to marry me. So he's kind of like trying to like throw out the hints out there, which probably wasn't very subtle because we're like 20 years old. You're not too subtle then. And she was like, oh, no, I definitely don't think I want to get married. And he told me, don't do it. I said, nah, I'm already in, man. Let's just go. I said, what's the worst? She says no. Like, I've just never been concerned about that. Ask her to marry me. Her first thing out of her mouth was, what will my dad say? I already talked to him. It's okay. And then once she knew her dad was okay, then she said yes. We got married, right? Has it just been rainbows and unicorns and that? No. It's work. But I went into it understanding that I got to do the stuff. That's why I sat there and listened to all those tapes and trying to get all this information in my mind so that when I'm hit with a problem, when I'm hit with something, that I can make the right choice, right? And that's something we continue to work on till the day we go back to heaven. So I've always been super pro-marriage. I couldn't wait to get married. Oh, my goodness, that's so great. So it's not when I see people that they don't like it as I think, oh, awful you. My heart breaks. Because it's like, darn it. I don't want sin and bad experiences to get a tainted view of something that God created in perfection before the fall. And so hopefully I can make a case for marriage for you this morning. So where do we want to go? Let's go back to Genesis 1. God is going through. He's created things in the heavens and the earth and the sun and the light and the animals, all this stuff. And then it's verse 27. It says, so then God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky. Kind of sounds like Aquaman there. And over every living creature that moves on the ground. So remember, we're getting a glimpse here of what his original perfect plan was. What was it? It was man, woman, male, female. And his plan was to get together, be fruitful, and multiply. Fill in the blanks there. His original design was that. In fact, it says, in verse 20, it says, God blesses them and says to them. This whole thing, it's a blessing. And then he performs the first marriage. Jump to the next chapter, Genesis 2. It says, the Lord God said, it is not good for the man to be alone, which is kind of funny because he's creating all these things, and it is good, it is good, it is good. And then he creates a single guy. He's like, yeah. Just kidding. If you're a single guy, you're fine. But you know what I mean. It's not good for this man to be alone, so then I will make a helper suitable for him. So along comes Eve. And as the man said, this is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man. And that is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife. Original design, original plan for humanity to grow was through marriage and through kids. And it doesn't, again, I'm not trying to make anyone feel, I'm not trying to make wherever your situation is to feel bad. I just want us to understand that marriage is holy. Marriage is beautiful. And it's not just an Old Testament thing, New Testament. Jesus says this in Matthew 19. He quotes the Old Testament. He says, haven't you heard, he replied, that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female and said, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. He's quoting what we just read. And then Jesus adds this, so they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. You see this is a God-designed thing. A God-planned thing. Again, think of that. Before the fall, in Eden, in perfection, God creates marriage. Think about, it's a sacrament, which I'll point out here in a little bit, but you also, if you have like baptism is a sacrament, communion is a sacrament. But those things are to fix things caused by the fall, right? When you look at the things that we still have, marriage is like a glimpse of his original plan. You say, not my marriage. I understand. We'll talk about that. But marriage, in its design, was created in perfection by God. Now, as I said, this understanding kind of marriage as a sacrament, some churches don't refer to it as a sacrament, others do, but it's without a doubt is a sacred sign of God's grace. He blesses these two. He tells them what they're going to do. He brings them together. Jesus echoes it. What God has joined together, let no man separate. There's something godly happening. That's what we call a sacrament. When you're baptized, you go down a sinner and you come out cleansed. Somehow in communion, we're a part of Jesus. His words are, eat of my flesh, drink of my blood. That's intense. But in some way, it's like we're communing with him. How is that happening? I don't know. Some God stuff's going on. So apparently in marriage, there's some God stuff going on. Paul talks about this. He makes the connection between Christ and his unbreakable love for the church. In Ephesians, he says, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. These guys plagiarize a lot. He adds this, he says, this is a profound mystery, but I am talking about Christ in the church. See, this mystery in there is like, you see marriage, and its original design was so that the two would love each other so perfectly as Christ does the church. Husbands and wives are called, like Christ gave himself for us, we're called to sacrificial love, mutual submission, lifelong fidelity. But all this, it came before the fall, before human rebellion, before sin. And if we look at it, it points us back to God's original intent, a union that fosters holiness, joy, and the flourishing of life. That's what you see when you get in marriage. So why does this matter today? Because you know it. In our world now, it's fallen. Sin has entered. Often we only hear the negatives. You hear the statistics. 60% of marriages end in divorce. Well, technically it's 60% of second marriages, 40% of first marriages. Inside the church, those numbers are way better, significantly so. But they still exist. We still hear of those things. That's scary. You've been through one, or you've been close to one. You've experienced it, the hurt, the pain that comes from that. Scares you a little bit. Like I said, I get it. I mean, I don't want to have scallops again. Scallops aren't as bad as going through that. But yet, through all of that stuff, through all the negative things we see, God's design remains the same. And you'll see it. Even modern research outside of the church who study the positive effects of marriage, not even from a Christian standpoint, they're out there making a case for marriage. In fact, two ladies wrote a book literally called The Case for Marriage. Linda Waite, Maggie Gallagher. They did all this data, all these studies to show how married people thrive. They found that married individuals reported lower levels of depression and distress, about 40% describing themselves as very happy, as compared to the single ones, about 25% of the ones they said were very happy. They notice that they live longer, they enjoy better health, they earn more money, accumulate greater wealth over their life. In fact, they say that married couples have way more assets compared to their unmarried counterparts. They invest more wisely in the future. Their satisfaction in the bedroom is higher. Alcohol and drug use lower. Overall life fulfillment soars compared to the opposite. They found even parenting thrives. I can't parent if I'm a single mom. Of course you can. But to say that God's original design, there aren't some benefits that come from that. But God's grace steps into that. But they found, just the statistics, that they find a greater enjoyment and success in raising children. Longevity, yep, married people have lower mortality rates, engage in healthier behaviors. They say that a single man, his life expectancy is about the same as smoking 2.5 packs of cigarettes a day. I didn't do the study. I'm just telling you. So when you look at it, and when it's done well, you find that they can be happier, healthier, live longer. See, how can that be? Because God designed, it's His design. You say, but I hear you saying all this. I hear you saying all this, but what about the struggles? What about the pain and the disappointments? Man, we see them all around us. I hear what you're saying, but that's not reality. Well, yes. When two unperfect people get together, even in holy matrimony, they bring with them that sin. And what you see in marriages that fall apart is you see the result of sin, and the union of marriage is not immune to that. But marriage doesn't bring it to the relationship. You know what marriage does is marriage points it out. And the same thing when you come to Christ. You ever been in church and just there'll be a song or something happening, and it's like you get emotional and you don't know why? It's happened to me, and sometimes it's kind of annoying. I don't want to be emotional. What's going on? Why am I tearing up? So the Holy Spirit can convict. The Holy Spirit points things out in us that we need to get right, that we need to change, that we need to adjust. When you jump into marriage, you can't hang on to the selfishness. You bring that selfishness in there, and marriage will point it out. But you got to understand, struggles, they do not diminish marriage's divine design. They highlight the need for God's grace in it. You get that? When you come into marriage, yeah, there's struggles, yeah, there's things, yeah, but that doesn't diminish His design. All that is doing, it is pointing out your need for His grace. As Paul says, this is a mystery. This is like Christ's love for the church. This is kind of how this is supposed to be, but who can love like that? Only Christ. How do we do it? Through the grace of God. See, when you jump into a marriage, and there's like no place for your selfishness to hide, right? As you get so close, so intimate in every area of your life. Everything's joined together. And if you got some little area you don't want anyone touching that, leave me alone, woman. This is my stuff. All of a sudden, kind of messes with you. So you know what I think for some people happens when they don't want to get married? Well, I'll get in a relationship, but I don't want to stay married so that I can hold on to the selfishness of me. I can hold on to the part that I don't want to have happen. But don't call marriage a thing. Now, again, if you've gone through it and you're like, man, sometimes you say, yeah, the problem was both of us. In some situations, no, the problem was mainly the other person. And if you've experienced that, say, I want nothing to do with it, I totally get that. All I'm saying is still don't let that experience keep you from thinking then, because you'll still find yourself getting in relationships and getting close to someone and falling in love. You think, well, I'm not going to say marriage because that meant hurt and pain. So, no, the other person was the problem, not marriage. So how do we find success, or how do you do this? Is like you need to go into it understanding we need God's grace in this. And you need to find someone else who is committed to the same thing. Have you find someone else who, I don't want any of that. It can end painfully. I've friends that get married and all of a sudden literally their wives are just like, yeah, I know I'm supposed to love you and do all stuff, but I don't want to anymore. I'm going to leave you. And he's just like, what? But there were some signs before, and you tell them, but as pastors, we try and warn you guys of stuff beforehand, but you all like giggle at us. No, it's okay. They're great. I know they act like that sometimes, but they're really a good person. No, because a good person doesn't act like that sometimes. This is why it's important to find one to do it with well. But what I love about marriage, and what I love thinking about it, what makes me smile, is when I sit and think like, I get to experience something that God created in the beginning for us. And I want to get the most I can out of that, so I need to try and do it the best that I can. Because I'm going to get it wrong sometimes. We all do. We all mess up. But as long as we're committed to going the right way, we're committed to letting it mess with us in a good way and pointing out those parts of us that it so painfully points out of like, right? Because marriage, like Christ with the church, I'm sure, well, Jesus prayed it. He said, Lord, if there's any other way to have this cup pass from me, if there's any other ideas you got, I'm totally open to them, Lord. If I don't have to go this way and have my friends betray me and end up on a cross, that'd be cool. But what did he say? He said, not my will, but yours be done. There's a method of that. We need to sort of bring that into our marriage. When it starts coming and starts messing with us, the thought is not so much to see, what can I get? What can I give? How do I give the other person something? The key to get what you want in the marriage is give the other person what they want. But we kind of like to Cold War things, don't we? Oh, hold on, you make the first move. No, you make the first move. No, I'll be nice to you. You start being nice to me. Well, I'll be nice to you. You start being that's not how it works. And you just see it kind of fall apart. So you got both of you need to be committed into doing this thing. Makes it way easier. So listen, our divorce is still going to happen. Yep. It's just a part of life. And part of the sin and brokenness and stuff happens. But please, don't refer to marriage as a 4-letter word. Don't think that that's where the problem is. Because I want you to have good relationships. I want that for you. The truth is, it's best in God's design and God's plan. You see, what happens is when we still want to get together and have relationships, especially as Christians outside of the church, they can do whatever they want to, whatever. But they inside the church, when we're doing that, we're basically saying, yes, God, I know this is how you created it, but come on, I really know how it's supposed to be. This is better for me. That's just us. That's man's wisdom. God's wisdom says, no, this is the way to do this. So it's difficult. It's difficult to talk about it in such a short period of time because there are a million what ifs and buts and this and that, and I'm happy to talk to any of you about that. My biggest thing I'm conveying to you, and that we can at least come to agreement, is, okay, marriage isn't the problem. That is holy. It is created by God. And so I'll at least just stop talking badly about that. And maybe if you've been holding off and you haven't been getting married because you're nervous of that, I pray that your heart would be softened towards it. I'm telling you, it's beautiful. It is beautiful. You have two people committed to each other, committed to doing it the right way, committed to daily saying no to their selfishness and trying to love the other person even sometimes when it gets tough, and then all of a sudden you do this in God's way and you start to see these blessings that come from it. It's amazing. It's wonderful.